is that D.C. doesn't stand for District of Columbia, but for Dodge City.
All of us are appalled. We're agonizing about it. We don't like the fact that we had 372 murders last year.
It's as if the White House and the Capitol were positioned on the streets of the Old West. These dots are where the fatal gunfights took place in the last year, most of them related to the sale of drugs. Unlike Dodge City, many of them involved only a single gun in the hands of an assassin, often a drug merchant trying to claim territory.
Washington, D.C. in the 1980s was a city under pressure. Politics and power existed only a few miles away from neighborhoods drowning in poverty, violence, and fear. While tourists saw monuments and government buildings, another world existed east of the White House, one ruled by hustlers, crews, and young men chasing money and respect in streets that had become increasingly dangerous. By the late 1980s, Washington, D.C. had earned a terrifying nickname across America: the murder capital of the United States. Entire blocks were controlled by crews moving money through underground economies. Sirens became background noise. Helicopters circled above apartment complexes at night. Teenagers grew up expecting violence before adulthood. And among all the names whispered through the streets, one stood above almost everyone else: Wayne "Silk" Perry. Even decades later, his name still carries weight in Washington, D.C. Stories about him spread through neighborhoods almost like mythology. Some described him as calm and intelligent. Others described him as ruthless and unpredictable. But nearly everyone agreed on one thing. When Silk Perry entered a room, people noticed. Born and raised in Washington, D.C., Wayne Perry came from the same environment that shaped many young men of that generation. Jobs were disappearing, neighborhoods were neglected, and the underground economy was becoming one of the only visible paths to money and influence. Older hustlers had already laid the foundation during the heroin era of the 1970s. By the 1980s, a younger generation was taking over. Unlike flashy figures who love public attention, Perry developed a reputation built on fear and discipline. He dressed clean, moved carefully, and rarely spoke more than necessary. In the streets, silence often created more fear than loud threats ever could. People around him began noticing how quickly his reputation spread. Rumors traveled block to block about confrontations, disputes, and violent incidents tied to his name. At the same time, Washington, D.C.'s underground world was rapidly expanding. Young crews were generating enormous amounts of money. Luxury cars appeared in neighborhoods filled with abandoned buildings. Expensive jewelry and designer clothing became symbols of survival and status. To teenagers watching from nearby corners, the lifestyle looked powerful. But behind the image was constant paranoia. Federal agencies were already monitoring major figures in New York City like Nicky and Frank Lucas years earlier. By the late 1980s, attention had shifted toward Washington, D.C., where violence levels were spiraling out of control. Wayne Perry's reputation grew strongest because of his alleged role as an enforcer. In street culture, enforcers were feared individuals trusted to handle conflicts, intimidation, and retaliation. Whether every rumor was true almost didn't matter anymore. The stories themselves became part of his power. People in D.C. began treating his name carefully. Even mentioning him in conversations reportedly changed the atmosphere around a room.
As part of the shift, the police chief is expected to move some officers from desk jobs to street patrols 1 day a week.
But Perry's story became nationally connected to another infamous figure from Harlem, Alberto "Alpo" Martinez. By the late 1980s, Alpo Martinez and associates from Harlem had expanded heavily into Washington, D.C. The city's underground economy was booming, and New York crews saw opportunities there. Alpo quickly built relationships in D.C., but surviving in that environment required strong local alliances. One of the most important names connected to him was Wayne Perry. The partnership between Alpo and Perry became legendary in both New York and Washington, D.C. One represented Harlem ambition and flashy confidence. The other represented D.C.'s cold street reputation. Together, they created an image that frightened rivals and fascinated entire neighborhoods. Stories spread rapidly about their movements through D.C. Luxury cars, expensive clothing, and large entourages became part of their image. But underneath the flashy lifestyle was growing chaos. Rivalries intensified. Federal investigations expanded. Violence escalated across the city. At the center of everything was fear. People feared law enforcement. They feared rival crews, and many feared the consequences of betrayal more than anything else. By the early 1990s, federal authorities had intensified investigations into major organizations operating between New York and Washington, D.C. Surveillance operations increased. Informants became critical tools. Prosecutors understood that these networks stretched across cities and involved millions of dollars. Then came the turning point that changed everything. Alpo Martinez was arrested in Washington, D.C., facing overwhelming federal pressure and the possibility of spending the rest of his life in prison. Alpo eventually agreed to cooperate with authorities. His decision shocked many people in both Harlem and D.C. Among the biggest consequences of that cooperation was the case against Wayne Perry. For years, Perry's reputation had protected him almost as much as his silence. But once federal testimony entered the picture, investigators suddenly gained access to information they had struggled to prove before. The streets that once feared speaking his name now watched his world begin collapsing. The betrayal narrative surrounding Alpo Martinez permanently changed how many people viewed both men. In Harlem and D.C., loyalty had always been treated like law. Informing against associates was considered one of the worst things someone could do. For many people, Alpo's cooperation erased whatever admiration they once had for him. Wayne Perry eventually faced federal prosecution and received multiple life sentences. For a man once feared across Washington, D.C., prison marked the complete collapse of his power in the streets. But Perry's story did not end there. Years later, something unexpected happened. While incarcerated, Wayne Perry reportedly underwent a major personal transformation. He converted to Islam and began distancing himself from the violent image that had once defined his reputation. Interviews and reports from people who interacted with him later described a quieter, reflective figure, very different from the feared name that once dominated D.C. conversations. To some observers, the transformation seemed impossible. How could someone associated with so much fear suddenly become calm and spiritual? Others believe prison forced him to confront the reality of his past and the damage caused during those years. Meanwhile, Washington, D.C. itself was changing. The city that once carried the title of murder capital slowly began transforming through redevelopment, gentrification, and political investment. Neighborhoods that had once been battle zones became filled with expensive apartments and coffee shops. Entire generations grew up hearing stories about the 1980s and 1990s almost like urban legends. Yet names like Wayne Perry continued surviving through documentaries, interviews, and street history discussions. Part of the fascination comes from how mysterious he remained compared to other figures from that era. Unlike flashy personalities who constantly sought cameras and attention, Perry rarely explained himself publicly. That silence created even more mythology around him. Another reason people remain fascinated is because his story represents a larger truth about many American cities during that period. Young men were growing up in environments shaped by poverty, failing systems, and violence. Some sought escape through sports or music. Others entered the underground economy because it appeared to offer the fastest path to money and survival. But the same streets that created legends also destroyed them. By the end of the 1990s, many of the era's most feared names were either dead, imprisoned, or hiding from their past. Entire communities had suffered devastating losses. Families were destroyed. Neighborhoods carried trauma that lasted generations. The story of Wayne "Silk" Perry is not just about one man. It is about an era when fear became currency. Reputations became survival tools, and entire cities lived under pressure. In Washington, D.C., people still debate his legacy. Some focus only on the violence associated with his name. Others point to his later transformation and religious conversion. But regardless of perspective, very few deny the impact his reputation had on the city during one of its darkest periods. And that is why his story still attracts attention decades later, because Wayne Perry represented something larger than himself. He represented the fear, ambition, paranoia, loyalty, and destruction of an era that changed Washington, D.C. forever.
Concentrated. It is smoked rather than sniffed. It produces an intense high within 5 to 10 seconds that lasts only 5 to 10 minutes and leaves the user craving for more.
And this is the most addicting thing that probably ever existed in the world, you know? It will make you a slave.
This is not one socioeconomic group using this drug. This isn't rich folks or poor folks. It's rich folks and poor folks. And it's blacks, whites, Hispanics. It's across the board. I have never seen a situation like this where a drug has mushroomed so quickly and gotten such a grip on large segments of the population.
Suddenly, the war on drugs took on a whole new meaning. Crack had its greatest appeal among society.
Generation, most of these people are using crack, using drugs, and it just causes them to do weird things, strange things. You know, kill you for a $10 rock, crack rock. They kill you for anything at all, nothing twice about it.
There have been 4 drug-related murders since the first of the year on Drake Place. Disturbances almost nightly.
Uzis, machine guns, you name it.
Spend a day in these neighborhoods of projects and modest homes, and you're overwhelmed by the drug sweeps and pushers. So are the people who live here.
Why do you think so many people are getting killed?
From drugs.
From drugs. Why though? What happened?
The drugs, the crack, the drugs, the crack.
I tell my children your father was killed because of drugs, and they know that.
For Brenda Hepler and her family, life in quiet Anderson County, South Carolina seemed full of promise a year ago. Her husband, a gifted teacher, had just been named principal of an elementary school. Then, as Dennis Hepler left the school one night, 2 men demanded money to buy cocaine.
He was shot twice, once in the back, in the shoulder, and once in the back of the head.
How much money was involved here?
$67.
The killers were caught and convicted. But as hard drugs spread beyond the cities, authorities are being overwhelmed.
Today, there's a new epidemic. Smokable cocaine, otherwise known as crack. It is an explosively destructive and often lethal substance which is crushing its users. It is an uncontrolled fire.
An alarmed President Reagan renewed President Nixon's war on drugs with a vengeance. Congress poured money back into local police forces to try to fight the rising tide of violent crime. And the White House organized an education campaign against drugs, a campaign geared to school children.
What will you do when someone offers you drugs? I can't hear you. Louder.
That everybody wants a piece of the pie.
A whole generation of kids, man, are being lost to this shit. The role figures that they have, you know, guys running around in BMWs and Mercedes with gold chains and, you know, bracelets and things like that. You know, kids want to be like that. They see these guys. They want to be the same way. And the only way to get that way is to sell crack.
What do you deal?
Cocaine.
Cocaine? How old are you?
14.
Why? Why did you get started?
I needed new clothes.
You needed new clothes?
Yeah.
And what else?
That's all. And I wanted to buy a little bit of gold.
You wanted to buy a little bit of gold?
I had money in my pocket.
How much money would you think you make in a day or in a week?
What, in a week?
Yeah, in a week.
About $800.
About $800 in a week.
Yeah.
The money attached to cocaine had the same attraction for third world countries as it did in America's inner cities.
It's just after midnight. We're deep in the Bolivian jungle, and this is a clandestine, very primitive cocaine laboratory. This is the first stage. Coca leaves, the source of cocaine, are being stomped into paste by these young men. The youngest is 14. They'll make about $10 tonight if they're lucky. It's about the only work they can get around here, and thousands of them flock in to do it.
In the late 1980s, it was estimated that cocaine production in Bolivia, Colombia, and Peru provided jobs for more than 1 million people who otherwise would have been unemployed. They worked for huge drug cartels, which made millions, manufacturing and wholesaling cocaine to the world's #1 market.
Despite our best efforts, illegal cocaine is coming into our country at alarming levels, and 4 to 5 million people regularly use it. My generation will remember how America swung into action when we were attacked in World War II. Well, now we're in another war for our freedom, and it's time for all of us to pull together again.
Reagan decided to strike directly at the source, South American countries that were the largest suppliers of drugs, by enlisting the Pentagon's